So, yeah, the connection between compliance and public procurement law is, of course, very close. I started as working for a law firm in private practice, doing a lot of public procurement law, and then I transferred to Siemens 6 years ago, and I'm now the general counsel within Siemens. And sometimes people ask, so what do you do when it comes to public procurement law within Siemens? Big wind projects, big healthcare projects we have. We supply MRIs, CT scans, do big projects for companies, but also in the infrastructure, cranes in the industry, so industrial cranes. So every work lawyers do within Siemens is related to public procurement law. So if you don't understand anything of public procurement law, you're in the wrong company when you work at Siemens. It is interesting, what you just saw in the film has been a while ago. We were fined in 2008, and Siemens decided to set up, was forced also, to set up a whole procedure of self-cleaning. And now you can see in the new directive that there is regulation on it. So there is 4 pillars, basically, 4 mandatory actions that you have to make on self-cleaning when you want to be exempted from being debarred from a debarment from public procurement in general. So you have to collaborate with investigators. You have to offer compensation for damages. You have to remove employees from the given area of responsibility. And internally, the organization has to be put in such a way that this is not going to happen again. The question is, how do you do that? How do you do that? And as I said, it was not in the former directive, but it was obvious that Siemens had to do something with all the bribes. And I thought, I read all the reports, and I thought, well, someone deep down in the organization or some people set up a system where it was really covered and well hidden what we were doing. But it wasn't. It was really clear. There were bank accounts with black money. There was, it was very clear that, you know, if we did projects in Africa, that the military forces would get some cars or even mayors from bigger cities who would support Siemens in projects would get bribed. It was really not difficult to find. So how do you turn around a company, and I think that there is still a lot of companies who do this, how do you turn around a company like this? And especially doing that in the Netherlands is obviously not a big deal, but doing it in China, or doing this in Africa or in South America is really something different. But if Siemens doesn't start it, if a big company, we've got 360,000 employees, we've got 2,500 lawyers, and we've got 80, yes. There's debate whether it's maybe too many. But anyway, so if you can't start this with a company like Siemens, who's going to start it? And you have to have the corporate industry to do something about this. I wanted to give you some insight, like what happened with Siemens. And there's a nice book, actually. It's written by your colleague Susan Arrowsmith and Joachim Priest on self-cleaning in public procurement law. And I probably would not surprise you if I tell you that this book was written in the same period as Siemens was dealing with these scandals. And Siemens had quite a big interest in having this book published, because Siemens was also afraid that after these scandals, what is going to happen when we want to do our business? Can we still continue with the business? So I think it is fair to say that initially, of course, the first response of the accountants we hired, of the lawyers we hired, and Siemens paid 335 million on accountants and 100 million on external lawyers to get an advice to see how we're going to set up this business in a proper way. And what you see is initially you just think about getting it straight. So what happened is that we started with compliance programs. That was training. So you sit and listen, and we tell you what you should do. It wasn't an interaction. And you can see that slightly through the years it has changed. Was first, you just have to inform your employees. After a while, you will have to make sure that it becomes part of them. You know, it's the words were here before. It's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing that your employees need to be convinced themselves that they should act compliant. Because if they don't feel like doing that, and they feel an urge to get this business, and the business targets are set that high, and the tone of the top is not right when it comes to compliance, you will never win that. So what you can see is that from training, we went into integrity dialogues, like, you know, listen to things like we just saw in the film. How do you feel about it? Do you realize when you are involved in bribing, or when you don't do a fair competition, what actually you're doing, if you do that on a bigger scale? And what you could also see is that, of course, on the internal organization, people were fired. That's obvious. In the senior management, 1 out of 3 person was moved outside Siemens. The old boys network really had to be broken down, because you cannot believe that a new way of working is going to happen if you're not going to change the system. And this was in the system. People came into Siemens, and it's really interesting because I really saw some really nice movies about that, which would be interesting to show you as well. But the peer pressure, the cultural development and it's a more psychological thing in the company, is so forcing. Obviously, if there is 10 people doing the same thing and one new person comes along, initially they will question, but after 3 questions and being the only one doing something different or having a different morality, you will start to, and it's obviously very human behavior, doing the same. So in order to be able to break that through, to not be involved in that peer pressure, you have to change the whole culture in the company. So that was part of it as well. But then Siemens also realized we can't do this alone. We can't just say Siemens is going to be compliant. You have to involve other companies as well. So Siemens started doing talks like this, not only with on an academical level, but also with customers, also with other suppliers. Like, how do you do that? How do we make a code of conduct? How do we work together in a compliant way? And what are our values? And how are we making sure that our suppliers and sub-suppliers follow that change? So initially there started up a discussion with these parties and big compliance list. The complaint about this is that it is over-regulated at Siemens. If you want to go for dinner with someone, you have to fill in a tool. But if you're not behind your desk, you don't have the tool. So we made an app. So when you're everywhere, you can fill out the app. And the app goes straight to your compliance officer, and he can approve or disapprove it is, not in line with what our standards are. So maybe you cannot avoid it, coming from such a heavy period to a new structure that you over-regulate. You have to stand on the barricade a little bit to preach and teach and get it into the company. And I think that now we're at the stage that we're letting go a little bit more. I think a very good example is that the other day I went into negotiations with a business partner. We wanted to do some business together with a part who is also a competitor of Siemens, but also a customer, and we wanted to do a development. And what you do at Siemens then is you check this business partner. What is the profile? And this business partner was in the industrial crane sector. So, and if you do this, and you also ship, and you have terminals in China and everywhere over the world, then you know that this is not the low-risk business partner setup you have. So what we did is we went there and we said we should try and see if we can get a framework on compliance with you. And they were busy with it as well, but you could see that there was still a bit of hesitance. Am I really going to sign a contract with Siemens where Siemens is allowed to stop all contracts with us when we feel that the company is not compliant? Because we don't want to wait until there is a judgment. If this company comes in the press and there is really serious suspicions of not being compliant, we want to be able to act, because this is what we told ourselves. How do you convince a company that they should allow you to do audits at their desks? Because they are also, you know, sometimes your supplier or customer. You know, how should they accept that? And how does Siemens look at it if they say, well, then we want to have the same rights? Huh? And how does that basically also work with competition law? Can you do this? Huh? And how do you arrange this? So we had negotiations about this, and it didn't go very easy. And we stepped out of the door, and I had a sales guy with me, and he said, oh, gee, you know, they're so far behind. They still have to understand how we need to get there. And I thought, this is really great, you know, that my sales guy is saying to me, the general counsel, they have not understood it quite well. And I think that this is a very positive element. Does it never happen with Siemens? It happens that we decide not to do deals because they're not compliant, that we pull back. It happens that we fire people because they have not been compliant. So we need to address. So I think that this was a little bit of an insight. Yeah.